There is a piece of common knowledge about cruising that almost every American believes, and it is only half true. The belief is simple. Carnival is the cheap party line, and Royal Caribbean is the nicer, more expensive one. You pick Carnival to save money, and Royal Caribbean to treat yourself. The reality is more complicated, and the gap between the two is not where most people think it is. Take two couples who sailed the same week this year, the same 7-night Caribbean route out of Florida, both in a balcony cabin. The Carnival couple paid about $2,900 all in. The Royal Caribbean couple paid about $3,800. On the surface, that confirms the reputation. Royal Caribbean cost more. But that $900 gap hides where the real differences are, and some of them run the opposite direction from what you would expect. Carnival and Royal Caribbean are the two biggest cruise lines in America, carrying roughly half of everyone who sails out of the United States. Anyone choosing a Caribbean cruise is usually choosing between these two, and most decide on reputation alone, without ever checking the actual numbers. This video checks them, line by line, on what each one truly costs an American couple in 2026, and on what the extra money on Royal Caribbean buys you. Every figure comes from current cruise line pricing and 2026 fare data. By the end, you will know which one costs more, by how much, and which one is the right call for how you actually travel. Start with the base fare, because that is where the reputation comes from, and it is mostly accurate. Carnival does underprice Royal Caribbean on the fare itself, and often by a real margin. On a 3- to 4-night Bahamas sailing in 2026, a Carnival interior cabin runs about $60 to $80 per person per day. The comparable Royal Caribbean interior runs closer to $85 to $110 per person per day. On a full 7-night Caribbean cruise, the gap holds. Carnival tends to come in lower on the same cabin tier, and Carnival's early booking rates typically run $100 to $200 cheaper than Royal Caribbean's for an equivalent cabin booked at the same time. So the reputation starts out true. If you compare the cheapest Carnival cabin to the cheapest Royal Caribbean cabin on the same route, Carnival almost always wins on the sticker price. To put real numbers on it, a 7-night Caribbean cruise for a family of 4 runs roughly $2,600 to $4,400 on Carnival, depending on cabin and sailing date, against $3,200 to $5,600 on Royal Caribbean for the comparable trip. For a couple, the figures are lower, but the shape is the same. Carnival on the bottom end, Royal Caribbean a clear step above it. Interior cabins on both lines start in a similar range, but the moment you move to a balcony or sail in peak season, the gap between them widens rather than closes. Royal Caribbean's floor is simply higher than Carnival's floor. And on the same booking window, Carnival's early rates hold that $100 to $200 per cabin advantage. But here is the first place the simple story breaks down. That gap narrows sharply when you move up in cabin category, and at the suite level, it can actually reverse. Royal Caribbean suites on their newer ships sometimes come out cheaper than Carnival's top suites, while offering more space and more included perks. Most couples over 55 are booking an interior or a balcony, not a top suite. So for most of you, Carnival's fare advantage is real. But if you are planning to splurge on a suite, do not assume Carnival is cheaper there. It frequently is not. Now the fees, because this is where the advertised price and the real price separate and where the two lines quietly differ in ways nobody compares before booking. Start with Gratuities, the mandatory daily charge added automatically to your account whether you asked for it or not. Here is where the fare comparison people do in their heads starts to fall apart, because almost nobody includes this number when they weigh the two lines. Carnival charges $16 per person per day for a standard cabin in 2026. Royal Caribbean charges $18.50. That $2.50 gap sounds like nothing. Then you run it across a real trip. For 2 people over 7 nights, it is $224 on Carnival against $259 on Royal Caribbean. For a family of 4, $448 against $518. A $70 difference that appears nowhere in the advertised price, that you never agreed to, and that you only discover as a line item on your final bill. And that is the pattern you need to understand about cruise pricing before you go any further. The numbers that actually decide which line is cheaper are never the ones in the big print. They are the ones added quietly, after you have already booked, when it is too late to change your mind. Next, the drink package. And this is the single biggest swing between the two lines. Carnival's Cheers package starts at $69.95 per person per day when you buy it before the cruise, before the 18% gratuity is added on top. Royal Caribbean's deluxe beverage package uses dynamic pricing, meaning the cost changes based on your specific ship and sailing date, but it generally runs $65 to $80 per day and often higher, and once the gratuity lands, it typically comes out above Carnival's rate. In general, on the same kind of sailing, Carnival's drink package costs less than Royal Caribbean's. Now here's a trap that catches couples constantly, and it is the kind of thing you only find out about when it is already too late to avoid. On both lines, there is a rule buried in the fine print. If one adult in the cabin buys the drink package, every other adult in that same cabin is forced to buy it too. So picture the common situation. One of you enjoys a few drinks, the other barely touches alcohol. You would think the drinker buys a package and the non-drinker skips it. You cannot. The line makes you buy 2 full packages or none at all. That rule applies equally to Carnival and Royal Caribbean, and it quietly adds hundreds of dollars to the bill of couples who never saw it coming. And this is where Carnival hands you a way out that Royal Caribbean does not. Carnival has a separate non-alcoholic package called Zero Proof, covering specialty coffees, mocktails, energy drinks, and bottled water for $29.99 a day. The important part is that it can be bought on its own. It does not trigger the whole cabin rule. So on Carnival, the couple where one person drinks and one does not can put the drinker on the full package and the non-drinker on Zero Proof and walk away paying far less than 2 full alcohol packages would have cost. On Royal Caribbean, no equivalent escape hatch exists. For a couple over 55 where one partner barely drinks, that single difference can save a few $100s in a week. It is the clearest example in this whole comparison of one line quietly giving you an option, the other one does not, and it tilts the drink math firmly toward Carnival. One more number worth knowing on the packages. Carnival caps its alcohol package at 15 drinks per 24-hour period. Royal Caribbean states no such limit. For almost every traveler, that cap is irrelevant, since 15 drinks in a day is not a vacation, it is a medical event. But it is a real difference in the fine print, and now you know it is there. So on the pure cost side, add it up. Lower base fare, lower gratuities, a cheaper drink package, and a workaround on the cabin rule that Royal Caribbean does not offer. For a typical couple in an interior or balcony cabin, Carnival comes out roughly $600 to $1,200 cheaper on the same Caribbean sailing once everything is counted. The reputation holds. Carnival is the lower total cost for most couples, and it is not particularly close. Before we get into that, one quick thing. If you are finding this useful, take a second to subscribe, because this channel exists to break down exactly these decisions before you spend the money, not after. And while you are down there, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I am always curious where in the country everyone is cruising out of, and it helps me figure out which ports and deals to cover next. Now, back to the money. So if the only thing that mattered were the number at the bottom of the invoice, you would close this video right now and book Carnival. But here is where it gets interesting, because that cheaper number is only half of the story, and the half nobody puts on a price sheet is the half that decides whether you actually enjoy the week. Royal Caribbean charges more. The real question is what that extra money buys, and whether it buys something you would actually want. Some of it does, some of it does not. Here is exactly where the money goes. Start with the cabin itself. Royal Caribbean gives you more room for your money at the same tier. An interior cabin on Royal Caribbean's Allure of the Seas runs about 172 square feet. A comparable interior on Carnival's Celebration is about 158 square feet. That is 14 square feet, which does not sound like much until you have spent 7 nights in a small cabin with another person and their luggage. Across the board, Royal Caribbean tends to offer more square footage in its basic cabins and dramatically larger suites at the top end. If space matters to you, and for a lot of couples over 55 it matters more than it used to, Royal Caribbean gives you more of it. Then the food, and this one is a genuine split, not a clear win for either line. Carnival's advantage is free casual dining. Guy's Burger Joint, Blue Iguana Cantina, Big Chicken, all included in your fare and available through most of the day with short waits. Carnival made a deliberate choice to keep its best casual food free rather than charging extra for it. And for a couple who wants to eat when they want without pulling out a credit card, that is a real plus. Royal Caribbean's advantage is at the specialty end, where its newer ships offer a wider and more elaborate lineup, places like Izumi, Chops Grill, and the experimental Wonderland. But more of Royal Caribbean's best food sits behind an upcharge. There is also a catch on Royal Caribbean's included food that longtime cruisers mention often. The quality and variety of the buffet can depend heavily on the size of the ship and how many people it is feeding. On a smaller Royal Caribbean ship, the buffet can be excellent. On one of the giant ships carrying several thousand passengers, cruisers reported getting stretched thin, with less variety day to day and long waits at the busy times. Carnival's casual food stays more consistent across its fleet because so much of it comes from those free-named venues rather than one central buffet. So the honest read is this: if you like eating casually and often without extra fees, Carnival serves you better and more consistently. If you want a special dining night out and you are willing to pay for it, Royal Caribbean gives you more to choose from at the top end. Neither is wrong. They are built for different eaters. If cost were the only thing that mattered, you would stop reading here and book Carnival. But the factor that decides whether a cruise is a good week or a disappointing one is not on any price sheet. And for a couple over 55, it may be the most important thing of all. It is the atmosphere. The average age of a Carnival passenger is around 45. On Royal Caribbean, it is around 49. That difference sounds small, but it shows up on the ship. Carnival leans into a laid-back party feel. It is called the fun ships for a reason. The deck music runs late, the energy is livelier and more social. Royal Caribbean, especially on its bigger, newer ships, has more of a resort feel, with more quiet space to retreat to when you want it. Neither is better in the abstract. If you want a social, high-energy, buzzy week, Carnival delivers it and delivers it cheaper. If you want the option to find a calm corner away from the noise, Royal Caribbean's larger ships give you more room to do that. A lot of older couples discover, sometimes too late, that the cheaper party ship was not actually the vacation they wanted. That is not a knock on Carnival. It is a reason to be honest with yourself about how you like to travel before you book on price alone. There is one more wrinkle in the atmosphere question, and it applies to both lines equally. Both Carnival and Royal Caribbean sail a mix of brand new ships and older, more dated ones. And in cruiser ratings, both lines get pulled down by their older vessels, which are increasingly felt to be worn and tired compared to the newest hardware. This is the part the price comparison hides completely. Two couples can book the same line at the same price and have very different weeks depending entirely on which ship they end up on. A newer ship on either line, with updated cabins and current dining and entertainment, is a clearly better experience than an older ship on the same line at a similar fare. The lesson that experienced cruisers repeat is that the specific ship matters as much as the cruise line, sometimes more. Before you book, look up which ship you would be sailing, check its age and its recent reviews, and do not assume that the line's reputation applies to every vessel in its fleet. It does not. There is one more difference that matters for anyone who cruises more than once, and here the roles reverse. This time it is Carnival's loyal customers who got burned. In January 2026, Royal Caribbean improved its loyalty program, Crown and Anchor, letting you apply your cruise nights across 3 brands: Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, and Silversea, so a frequent cruiser can consolidate status instead of watching it scatter. Carnival went the other way. It shifted its rewards to a spending-based model that resets on a rolling basis rather than lasting for life. Think about what that means for someone who spent 15 years earning their status on Carnival. Overnight, the recognition they built over a decade and a half stopped being permanent. Longtime Carnival cruisers were, to put it mildly, not happy. If you are the kind of traveler who picks one line and stays loyal to it, Royal Caribbean now rewards that loyalty better, and Carnival's change is a real mark against it, with the very customers who were most devoted to it. Both lines also invested heavily in private islands for 2026, and both include a private beach day on many Caribbean itineraries, so neither has a clear edge there. One caution worth knowing, though: Royal Caribbean's long-standing private destination in Haiti, Labadee, is on hold through the end of 2026 over safety concerns, with those ships rerouted elsewhere. If a specific private island is part of why you are booking, confirm it is operating on your sailing before you put money down. So here is the verdict. And it is not a dodge, it is a decision with a clear default. For the typical American couple over 55, booking an interior or balcony cabin on a Caribbean sailing, Carnival costs less. Not marginally less. Roughly $600 to $1,200 less once you count the base fare, the lower gratuities, the cheaper drink package, and the zero-proof workaround for a non-drinking spouse. If your priority is spending the least money for a good week in the Caribbean, Carnival is the correct answer. And the party ship reputation should not scare you off, because plenty of relaxed older couples sail Carnival happily. Royal Caribbean is worth the extra money in specific cases, and here they are plainly. If you want more cabin space, if you want quieter areas to escape the crowds, if you cruise often enough that the stronger loyalty program pays you back over time, or if the bigger ships and the wider specialty dining genuinely appeal to you, then the extra $400 or so per person is buying something real, and Royal Caribbean earns it. It is not a ripoff. It is a more expensive product that delivers more, and for the right traveler, that trade is worth making. What neither line is doing is overcharging you for nothing. This is not a case where one company is fair and the other is fleecing you. They are priced differently for different people. Carnival competes on being the affordable, social, eat-anytime option. Royal Caribbean competes on space, polish, and a quieter premium experience. The mistake is not choosing the pricier one. The mistake is choosing either one on reputation alone, without checking which fee structure and which atmosphere actually fits the trip you want. Before you book either line, do this. Price the exact sailing you want on both, in the same cabin category and the same week. Then add the real costs on top of each fare, the gratuities at $16 a day for Carnival or $18.50 for Royal Caribbean per person, the drink package if you want one, and be honest about whether your cabin partner will use it. Put those numbers side by side. For most couples, the Carnival total will land a few hundred to over $1,000 lower. And then the only question left is whether Royal Caribbean's extra space and quieter feel are worth that gap to you specifically. That is a question only you can answer. But now you can answer it with the real numbers in front of you instead of a reputation you picked up secondhand. That is the honest comparison. One line costs less, the other gives more, and the right choice is the one that matches how you actually want to spend the week. If you want to see how much both of these lines add on top of the fare once you are actually on board, we broke down every hidden cruise cost, the gratuities, the drink packages, and the excursions that turn an advertised price into a much bigger final bill. That video is on the channel now.